you're going to get credit for this. Those of you who are going to need it for things like ministerial licensing and if you want to get academic credit for it. I'm going to be doing, for 3 weeks, I'm going to be talking about New Testament. And I'm going to bore you, but I'm going to learn you something. I'm going to learn you something. And so I'm really, well, let me read a scripture first, okay? And I want you to turn to Acts 17. How many ready to hear the word tonight? Amen. I'm ready to teach it. I'm going to be teaching 3 sessions, so this should be good. It should be good, if I have to say so myself. Acts chapter 17. I want to read some verses there before, because I'm going to be talking to you about a period what was called the Hellenization, and I really, if I had time, since I'm only going to do an hour, and next week I'm going to break from it, and y'all going to want me to talk some more about it. But I'm going to do an hour on Hellenization. Next week I'm going to do an hour on Nicaea, and then the following week I'm going to do Protestant Reformation. So I'm going to teach from those subjects. I'm not going to even be able to survey them, but I want to give you some, when you leave, so that you'll have some understanding of what at least that terminology mean. All right, so, because most of us know that whenever we look at Old Testament, New Testament, we see what look like different worlds. If anybody whoever went through Old Testament, Torah, and you saw things like judges and kings and prophets. Well, in the New Testament, you don't see none of that. You see things like Pharisees and Sadducees. Well, that tell you we done missed some things, right? And so we want to talk about what we missed, and in reality, there's a reason why we missed it. And let's go. Let me just read, because this the thing that caused us to miss it is 400 years between the testaments, approximately 400 years between Old Testament and New Testament, and those 400 years, we say that that God was silent. You call them the silent years, but in fact, God ain't never silent, right? So we really want to key into it. We want to really. I'm going to do my best to give you some understanding of it, and then we're going to go. We're going to be real. And thank you, those of you who are on our platforms, whether Facebook, whatever platform you're with us tonight from. I hope it blesses you. Go ahead and share it. Tag somebody. Tell them, Bishop Rogers is teaching on Hellenization tonight, and so they can ask you, what in the world is that? And they'll get on in here, and they'll do it. Just imagine. I really want to give you how did it impact Christianity, Jewish life. So when it's all said and done, when we read the scriptures, we'll look at them and say, oh, this is a result of being Hellenized, right? And so we'll do that. In the 17th chapter, let me, it's so much I want to read, but yuck. Verse 16. Now, while Paul waited for them in Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Now, so I want you to think Hellenization, and maybe I should tell you, it is the sharing and creating of Greek culture into all the world, in making in all society being touched by Greek or Grecian influence. Okay, so he says he saw the whole city, the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons in the market daily with them that met with him. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him, and some said, "What will this babbler say?" Others some, "He seemeth to be a settler forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection." Now, so when you're reading certain texts, I want you to put yourself down in it, in the setting, so that you'll understand that when they're saying certain things, they didn't just saying strange God. Why are they talking about strange gods? Because he's preaching Jesus. Well, they either don't believe in Jesus or never heard of it. Right? So, all right, so he said, because, he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him unto Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new doctrine thou speakest is?" Now here we are 2,000 years later. "For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. We would know therefore what these things mean. For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing but either to tell or to hear some new thing." Sound like the church, don't it? Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, "You men of Athens, I perceive that you are, in all things, you are too superstitious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotion, I found," now you got to remember that Areopagus was a place that they had monuments all on Mars Hill, and all of them had a different god, and they had all of these monuments for fear that they might miss one, right? So when everybody made sure that their God was represented, they put a sign up that said, "To the unknown God." Isn't that something? "Whom ye ignorantly worship, him I declare to you." So and then he begins to preach Jesus, right? So seeing him, Paul now comes, because whenever we think about New Testament, we just think about preaching between Jews and Gentiles. But it's much larger than that. It's much, and because it was impacted more than just the Jews. It was impacted because there was this Greek influence and culture that had already overcome the place. In fact, the Rome that was in Jesus' day, and we'll get to Rome hopefully. The Rome that was in Jesus' day was the Romans had already had 100 years of influence, but it wasn't their influence. It was still Greek influence, right? I mean, even the language. When we talk about Koine Greek, where the New Testament was written, the Jews were still upset, many of them, because they had taken the Old Testament writings and changed it and translated it into Greek, which we call the Septuagint. And many of them, even though they had these Greek Bibles, many of them still couldn't couldn't understand it because the Jews in that day, they spoke a language called Aramaic. It's still kind of a, so when they hear of, like if you look in Acts 7 and all through Acts, man, we see it. We see Hellenization in Acts all the way. But even in Acts 7, you'll see these Hellenizers, and we won't really understand it. But let me get on to the way, because that's too long to be taking up a intro. All right. But I think, can I say something else about this fasting and praying? I wanted to bring us to holiness. See, this is why the Bible says, and we got to be careful, because that's why the Bible says, tells us not to be many teachers. It says not many masters, because they bring a greater condemnation. You before you jump on this call, you better know that you're ready for this work. Right? This is going to take something if we're going to do real holiness, because I know I'm 6-7 years old, so I done went through all of that ground many of y'all walking down, talking about we ain't nothing but humans, and all men have sinned. But you know what? It still requires discipline. So God know we ain't perfect, but He wants us to have boundaries. And so can I call some things out? Because what we tend to do is that we tend to convince ourselves that we're in God and not serve God. And you can't serve God if you ain't obedient to this word. See, so I don't ever want to miss the weight of this call. Or in this assignment. This assignment means something to me. I ain't in none of your business. I don't care about your business. I really don't. You never hear me get up talk about other preachers, do you? No, because I ain't that far from them. If it took years for me to really understand that God really means holiness. What He's saying is actually what He said. See, and so we can't afford to keep defining sin as struggle. we just can't. I mean, there's some things that you ought to require of me because I said God sent me. That's how they defined the apostles. That's how they defined all the priests that came and the Sadducees. They defined them because there's some things sin eliminates you from. See, and you don't have, and for those of you who are preaching, and I promise you, I know who you are. So I mean, and this is the year that you're gonna have to be exposed, and will be exposed. Paul says, I'm a prisoner to this thing. Y'all ain't saying nothing. I'm a prisoner. That's what he said to the Ephesians. Yeah. So if we're going to have a revival, it has to be a revival of holiness. We have to get back a human. Being human is should not cause us to live reckless. How about that? So we're going to talk about some things, and I said to you that this Hellenization thing is really a culture shift, and the church ought to be a culture shift to people. They shouldn't come in the church and the church look like what they've been in, and y'all have the same relationship after coming to church that you had before the church, and we've been so acceptant of everybody, and we accept people even if they don't change. And it's hurt the church, because the church is a place for change. Not you come to church, you want to change. No, you come to church and we demand change. There's something we just say there's some things you can't do over here. Now that's what we used to do. Now we want people to, we want them to come back. So we just tell them, say, God, he love it, he understand. He does understand. He understands that you make the decision whether or not you're gonna live or die, whether you're gonna go to heaven or hell. He understands all of that. And don't let me get off track. Don't let me get. But that's where we are in the New Testament. You can't read this New Testament, and that's why I say that we got to be Bible readers and we got to know this Bible. You can't read this Old Testament and New Testament and not change how you live, because you're wasting time. See, and so Hellenization was this process of blending. See, it's blending cultures that is deciding what kind of culture we gonna be. That's what it was. And it goes on. We have to go back all the way back to 300 and something BCE. And I don't use BCAD because everybody ain't after the death of Christ. Everybody ain't Christian. So I just say before the Common Era. So 300 years before the Common Era, there was this war, and we have to. I wish we had time to talk about all of these things, but when Darius was ruled the Persians, and Philip was ruling Macedonia, they get in this war, and although Philip is now holding his own, it was not until he died and his son took charge. His son was called Alexander the Great, right? And Alexander the Great began to take over much of the world. Now, most of you won't know and don't know that when we read our Bible, we read these 66 books. That's just the Protestant Bible. We're going to talk about Protestant Reformation, but that's just the Protestant Bible. But do you know everybody don't have 66 books. If you were Catholic, you'd have 13 more books. You'll have 73. If you were Eastern Orthodox, they got 76 books. And for those of you who down with it, you got the Ethiopian Bible, and it has 81 books. But the 13 books that has a canon, but we don't often recognize it. We call them the Apocrypha. And man, anybody ever read the Apocryphas? Thank you for raising your hand back there. It's some interesting, but we're gonna read some tonight, so don't worry about it. 13 books, and we can talk about a lot of reasons why they weren't actually added to the canon, but the reality is, whenever they did the Septuagint and the Old Testament, the Apocrypha was included in it. They read books like the Tobit and the Maccabees. We're gonna read back some of Maccabean tonight, so don't worry about it. They had these books that they read them, and I want to say to you that I would suggest that we can't really have a full understanding of the world that Jesus lived in without reading the Apocrypha. We just couldn't. Because we'll look at this relationship that Jesus had with these men who were holy and godly, and we'll be talking about them and saying, you a Pharisee, and we don't even understand what that means. Because if you really understand the Pharisees, you'll have a little more, you'd feel a little bit more for them and have a few more thank yous in you for them. Because even though we don't know their exact origin, we know they came out of the Maccabean revolt that we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. And so the Apocrypha, when anybody who read the Septuagint know that was a result of them Hellenization, because if you're going to have one culture, one religion, one finance system. You know, if you're gonna have one religion, you got to have one Bible, huh? And the Jews. So instead of saying to the Jews, "Hey, we're gonna take your Old Testament, we're gonna take it away from you," you know they weren't gonna do that. They weren't gonna allow them to do that. So what they did was that they translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, so everybody can have access to it. And I mean when I say everybody, I don't mean common people, because the church has always fought common people from getting the word. Right? We're in a society now where they're fighting common people from getting the word, and that's why you see so many people messing up the word. That we don't give you pure word. We rather give you something that you'll accept as being the word, right? So, but the Catholic Church was really engaged and involved in that. But let me move on. So we have these books of the Apocrypha, the Deuteronomy canon. Some people accepted them, some people not. Now, I'm not saying that the Apocryphas weren't God inspired, because there's a lot of history in them. So, the canon is really a word that means weight, and so some of them weren't able to prove authorship. Some of them they had some things that didn't line up with the ones who made. I mean, even some of our New Testament books almost didn't make the canon. So there were a lot of issues there. In fact, it wasn't until around the 19th century that these apocryphas were taken out of our King James Bible. So if you got a King James Bible from 1611, it would have included those books. All right. So I want to talk some New Testament, but I'm trying to give you a little history. And so I told you I'm gonna be bored. So since I already told you that, you don't have to ask nobody, was he bored? He said he's gonna be bored, right? Right. But the Catholics, they were committed to it. In fact, even when it came down to the Council of Trent, that's one of the statements they made that came out of Council of Trent, one of the early ecumenical councils, that it's a secondary canon, but it's accurate. That's what the Catholic. I know we're not Catholic, but some of y'all not. I forgot Kirk was in here. So Philip Macedon and Darius were in war. Philip dies. His son Alexander the Great. He in fact in a few years, in 12 years of his reign, almost took over the world. But he died, and he died of a fever. He didn't get killed in a battle, and he died. And his kingdom was divided into 4 pieces. And I wish I had some handouts to give you, but the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, were probably the most noted, and the Seleucids was the ones who came around Jerusalem and Judea and all of that. So you can deal with that once I get through dealing with you. But his 4 generals that took over the kingdom, and they fought one against another, and there were 6 groups that came out of this period that's called hell. Now this is 400 years between the testaments, right? I mean, I'll tell you a way to look at it. When you go to the book of Esther and Haman, you know how Haman, the Persian king is going to kill all of Israel, and Haman goes to Esther and say, hey, listen, you know, you don't know. You were brought to the king for such a time as that. Who knows? And it, from that period where Israel was saved, to the time that we see, in fact, we see John Baptist, who's an Essene, come out of the wilderness, you know, with wild guy preaching. It's in that period of time. So there was a lot that happened. There's a lot that happened, and it was the rise of Hellenization. But remember, we talk about it as though it was only in Judah. No, it was in every nation. It was in Egypt. It was in the Byzantine period. It was all of these times that this Greek influence overcame whether or not you were Jew, whether you were a heathen, and you'll read some of it when you look in New Testament. All right, let's go. I want you to go. I can't get you to go. Die. Can you go in and you'll go into and pull up First Maccabean chapter 1 and see if we can. All right, because I'm gonna read some of it. All right, there are 6 groups that I think influenced that we found come out: the Pharisees, Sadducees, Herodians, Zealots, Sycharites, and the Essenes. And we know John Baptist was an Essene. And so all of them came as a result of what we call the Maccabean revolt. And don't worry about the Pharisees, because you know Pharisees, the word means separated. And you kind of have to know some of this history in order to know what they were separated from. Any luck, die? Oh, okay. I mean, no. I'm gonna talk. Don't worry. Yeah. So this book of Maccabean, it talks about a time when you start seeing these generals warring, and during this period of the Seleucids, you know, they always had enemies, and you start seeing now Greek influence start overtaking people who were rabbinical Jews, people who were serious about this faith. I mean, anybody ever heard of Hanukkah? You know, Hanukkah is really just a 8-day celebration that celebrated the Maccabean revolt. That's actually what they're doing. I said Hanukkah. I did not say that. Y'all are tail. I don't know what you heard. Well, I tell you what, if I said Hanukkah, people were raising their hands. I ain't ever heard of Hanukkah, but some of y'all ain't heard of Hanukkah. Did you find it, Di? Let's put it. I'm sorry if I said that. This is the year for me to repent. You know what God's going to do for us this year? He's going to cause us to understand our frailties. And that's going to be a wonderful thing. Now I'm talking about during this period where the Greco Persian War happened. But the land that Jesus walked in, the Romans had taken over the Grecians. So, because around 63 BC, Pompey comes in, so really by the time Jesus begins his ministry, it's been 100 years that the Romans were now in charge of Judaism. Thank you. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to see it, but I got some of here that I can read it. The book of Maccabean tells the story of between the Testament. How about that? It tells the whole story. Now, it's only about 15, 16 chapters. Now, first Maccabean, second Maccabean is really kind of a microscope. They kind of just, pull out the lens and talk about some of the other battles. But we're going to read a few verses, and I'm going to let you read it on your own. And you don't even have to go and buy no Apocrypha. Just type in Maccabean. You can go in and start reading, right? All right, so there you go. But don't be talking about King James Version, because I just told you it's not a part of a King James Bible. All right, so let me just read some of this and see if it's make any sense to you. After Alexander, son of Philip, I just said that, right? The Macedonian who came from the land of Kittim had defeated King Darius of the Persians and the Medes. He succeeded him as king, right? His son succeeded him. So he had previously become king of Greece. He fought many battles, conquered strongholds, slaughtered the kings of the earth. This is Alexander, right? He advanced to the end of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet, when there was no more fight back before him, he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes, and they paid him tribute. Now, I want you to understand, they weren't just taking land, it was all about money. So a lot of times when we look at things like Antiochus Epiphanes, and how it is that he wanted to take over these Jews. It wasn't about their culture. He wasn't concerned. These folk weren't concerned about whether or not what religion you had. This is the religion that they insisted on you having, but it wasn't about they agreeing with you or disagreeing with you. It was about the tribute. And you're going to see this after, here a minute. After he fell sick and perceived that he was dying, so he summoned his most honored officers. This is Alexander, fell sick and figured he was dying, who had been brought up with him from youth, and divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. And after Alexander reigned 12 years, he died. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. That's why this is, right? They all put on crowns after his death. It's a split church. And so did their descendants after them many years, because the fighting continued. And they caused many evils on the earth. From them came a sinful root, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus. He had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days, certain renegades came out of Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make covenant with the nations around us. And since we separated from them, many disasters have come upon us. This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king and authorized them to observe the ordinances of the nation. And so you see that it was about this time, you see even Jews started turning and saying, hey, you know what, let's, rather than trying to kill everybody, let's just, let's make some covenants. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus turned back 143rd year and went up, that's 10 years later, went against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar. Now listen, look at what's happening. You see, now, so you'll know it ain't even just about their religion. When he subdued Israel, what did he do? He went into the sanctuary, started taking stuff. Right? In fact, he's plundering things. Look, he took the golden altar, the lampstand for the lights, and all its utensils. This is about money, ain't it? He took also the table for the bread of the presence, the cup for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, curtains, crowns, and the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it off. He took the silver and the gold and costly vessels. He took also the hidden treasures that he found. Taking them all, he went into his own land. He shed much blood and spake with great arrogance. Look at what I did. Right? So he desecrated the temple, didn't he? To defile the sanctuary and the Holy One, to build altars. Now look at what he did. To build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols. You ever heard what is it called? You ever saw in the New Testament the term what is it? Who said it again? Abomination of desecration? Desolation. You ever heard of that in the New Testament? The abomination, Jesus said, according to Daniel, when you see the abomination of desolation, then he said, look to the hills. Right? So many scholars say that this is referring to this act, that he goes and he plunders the temple and then take a pig and sacrifice it on the altar. That's an abomination of desolation, right? And let's go to chapter 2. Can you? Y'all got it on your phones now, don't you? Okay, well, it don't matter then. Okay, now look at what happens. Now he's forcing everybody. He really seeing where they are. And remember, all of these Jewish priests, all of these Jews are seeing their religion just be plundered. And then comes a priest named Matthias. Matthias had 5 sons. Excuse me. 5 sons. Let me just read it. In those days, Matthias, son of John of Simeon, the priest of the clan of Joarib, moved from Jerusalem and settled in Modin. He had 5 sons. They named the sons. Go down to verse 8. Verse 9. But no, I want to go. I need to go back up. Eleazar, Avaron, Jonathan, Apus, he saw the blasphemies many committed in Judah and Jerusalem, and said, Alas, why was I born to see this? The ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city. The people sat idle there when it was given over to the enemies. The sanctuary given over to the strangers. Wait a minute, this sounds like church, but I'm not going to say nothing, because the people are sitting idle while we seeing defilement in the house of God. People are not saying nothing while all the sacred things are taken, and replacing them with things that will defile the house. It sounds like New Testament church. Her temple have become like a person without honor. People are mocking the very church of God, and ain't nobody willing to fight. We rather, now I'm not accusing you. I'm just trying to point something to you that God requires. The reason that God requires holiness out of us is because He needs some stand up out of us. Y'all ain't saying nothing. So as long as Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes can come against the people of God, and the people of God be so afraid to say nothing. We're afraid we might lose them. We're afraid we might hurt them. We're afraid that we might be seen on social media like that we're wrong. I'm seeing, and I'm not talking about preachers, but I'm seeing when preachers make a stand, the whole world come against them. If they say, well, holiness is right, but everybody don't agree with what holiness is. Everybody know what holiness is. So it make you, and they try to present you as being old-fashioned, and you out of touch, and they heaping after themselves teachers, y'all may not be seeing it, but we see Antiochus fourth Epiphanes right in front of us all the time, and we ain't willing to stand our ground. The church got to stand its ground. See, we're in the world, we ain't of it. Quite trying to fit in. They shouldn't like us because we point them to holiness. That's why, listen, the reason that we have to land in a holy place is because we have to show them. You can't just go on your job and say, hey, come join me at my church. And they don't see nothing in your life that will call. Y'all ain't saying nothing. If they're going to follow you, you got to be going somewhere. It got to be something about you that they say, oh, this is different. This ain't like what I'm used to. Come on. I said it ain't like what I'm used to. And I know we rolling out of time, but I'm taking all the time I'm in need of because I don't want you to get this far and just to get this far and not understand that God is requiring something different. If we want something different, he's requiring something different. I promise you that you ain't going to live the life you lived last year and expect something more this year. God is expecting you. Now, if you want to be entangled in the world, you're going to get the same thing the world was getting. But see, they ain't going to look to you to help me up, and you down there with them. Come on, y'all. Come on. I mean, I shouldn't be the first number they call. I should be the last one they come to because they know, because when they come to me, it's going to require change. Y'all ain't saying nothing. So he says, verse 19, this is where I was trying to get back to. But Matthias answered and said in a loud voice, even if all the nation that live under the rule of the king obey him and have chosen to obey his commandment, every one of them abandoning the religion of their ancestors, I and my sons and me and my house and my brothers will continue to live by the covenant of the ancestors. We're gonna live according to what God has said. We ain't gonna change, because remember, the whole world is changing, and it's hard when everything around you is saying it's all right, but what you know from serving God, you know it ain't all right. It's hard to stand with that. It's hard. I'm telling you, it's hard. I mean, it's so much easier because you be like, Well, you know what? It ain't that. It ain't that serious. Well, it just might be. Is this too tough? It just might be. It might be required. And so what we have to do is that we have to spend a lot of time this year getting rid of ourselves. Thank you for them 2, 3 claps. I mean, because I didn't really need them. I'm just trying to tell you. I'm trying to, because somebody's got to stand up and say, hey, you know what? If everybody else ain't going to serve him, let's make up our mind that we're going to serve him. If everybody else had decided that, you know what, we're going to just go with the flow, we ain't going with the flow. We remember what he said. I know what we in a time where, 400 years and folk have gone lower and lower. I mean, but there comes a time where somebody ought to make up their mind it's time to revolt. And that's why I think we are right now. I think it's time to revolt. I think it's time to not worry about how people see Hope Community Church and what people think about Hope Community Church. But and I'll take Jesus for mine, and it's holiness without which no man can see the Lord. And y'all ain't saying nothing. And cry out with a loud voice, say, as for me and my house. Yeah, that means my daughter, my granddaughter, my son. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. They you know what, they're going to serve him even if they have to hide. Play till you get it straight. I don't care. We going to serve the Lord. We going to serve the Lord. You ain't eating my chicken dinners and then not walking with God. That's the devil is a lie. Are y'all with me? Matthias cried out in the town, verse 27, in the town with a loud voice saying, let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant come with me. Then he and his sons fled to the hills. Now this ain't even scripture, but this is almost a real history book, isn't it? Because we got a history of Matthias. And this priest. Then he and his sons fled to the hills and left all they had in the town. And that time, many who were seeking righteousness and justice went down to the wilderness to live there. People followed them. And they would, and this is really the start of what was known as a guerrilla warfare. They would sneak back into town. And they would attack the enemy and until they had to make a covenant with them. This is the Maccabean revolt. Till they made a covenant with them to let them serve God. Because if I can't serve him in the city, I'll run to the hills. But I will serve him. And that little army began to get so big and that we began to see groups start now studying and putting word together and saying, you know what, we're gonna serve God, and this is what God was actually intending for us to do. This and you'll see it. They start studying the Torah and the Tanakh and I guess I need to use that word because they didn't just. That's why when the Pharisees came out, they came out holding on to the Tanakh. They didn't just have the law, the writings, but they also had they had began to develop how is it that you keep the law. They had 613 laws that would help them keep the law. So it wasn't just good enough to say, hey, listen, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, but they gave you instructions on how to keep it holy. That because to them you couldn't walk, you can only walk 2/3 of a mile on Sabbath. You couldn't look in the mirror because you'd be breaking the Sabbath. They had all of these laws that. Yeah, I ain't gonna start that because something is so silly in my mind. Yeah. But when the Pharisees came, when these Pharisees who really believed, they believed much like we believe today, when they came out and they're talking to Jesus, they're part of this. Of course, you got to be a little bit more history buff. The Sanhedrin Council, which was really kind of, how the Romans allowed them to have a court, and that Sanhedrin court. I mean, there was always divisions between the Sadducees and Pharisees in that court, and the Sadducees were, they had more money, but the Pharisees had more influence because people respected them better. It was when Jesus came on the scene that he looked at them and he said, "You hypocrites." Because he says, you tithe on your spice and your all the things that you have. In other words, all the seasonings in your house, you made sure you tithe it on. You put tithe on them, but you didn't do the weightier matters of the law. Now you going through all of that, all of that calculation to make sure your brown sugar is divided, but you can't, but your mercy is gone. Yeah. You straining a gnat, you swallow the camel. You remember that Jesus said that, y'all straining a gnat, swallow a camel? He said that because, you get unclean if you swallow the gnat, and they would make sure. Y'all straining at gnats, but you swallowing camels. You making sure little things don't. You see, and those are the issues. That's the issues. And so Jesus, when he saw him, he said, you ain't keeping my law. You ain't keeping my law. And for all of these years, y'all been out in the woods. Y'all still ain't keeping the law. And so by the time they came back to the city of Jerusalem, they were real respected because of why? The Maccabean revolt. These are the ones who held on to the law and made sure. And so it wasn't a bad thing that they made sure that everything that the people did was according to the law. It wasn't a bad thing because they had lost their way and nobody was keeping up with the law. Right? But they had gotten so caught up with themselves that Jesus couldn't do nothing with them. That's the issue with the Pharisees. And so to have a Pharisaical spirit would have a spirit of you thinking more highly of yourself than you ought to think. It isn't about what they wasn't telling the truth, but you judging other people by stuff you can't do yourself. Right? So Hellenization was to draw them away from God, and there had to be a full-on war in order for the Jews to hold on to. And so by the time Jesus comes, they fighting to maintain their religion, and really their religion was getting ready to be fulfilled right before them. I want to read 2-3 scriptures, and then we're gonna quit it for the night. I want you to go to Acts. Maybe I'll read them all in Acts. Acts chapter 6. If I stop reading, would somebody pick it up? If you read loud, I don't want you doing that. I need you to open up your mouth and not sound like a sailor. And in verse 1, and make sure I got it. And in these days, disciples multiplying, there came a murmuring of the Hellenists at the Hebrews. What did King James say? Grecians. Grecians, that's the Hellenists, right? At the Hebrews, right? Does it say Hebrews in King James? Okay, good. Because their widows were being overlooked in the daily ministration. You see the conflict was happening? Because here we are in a time where there were some Hebrews who stood their ground. They were still speaking Hebrew. But there was some Hellenist widows there who became a part of Hellenization. The Grecians, they were Greeks. They were Greeks, and there was a little bit of a prejudice because this was during the communal church when everybody shared everything in common. The real church. They had everything in common, but the Grecian widows, how is it that when their husband died, they didn't even feed them? Just act like, here you go. Here you go. And so they start, it was a conflict because if you ain't going to treat everybody the same, what we doing here? And of course, I won't ask you to read it because that's when the apostles start looking around and say, you know what? We shouldn't be dealing with no conflict like this. Worrying about who got what, and so look out among you and choose deacons, right? So you see the development of the church, right? All right. Let's go to chapter 9. So just because we come in a time with Jesus, and remember this is after the resurrection of Jesus, and there's still conflict in the church. Y'all wondering how come there's conflict in the church now? There's always been some conflict in the church, right? Verse 29 in chapter 9, in speaking boldly the name of the Lord Jesus, he was both speaking and disputing with the Hellenists. Does King James say Grecians? Okay, I'm just going to start saying Grecians. And they were taken in hand to kill him, right? All right. I read 17, didn't I? Let me. I'm just gonna read some Acts. I'm gonna read it again and see if it sounds different to you. Now all the Athenians and foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but hearing and articulating new ideas. Now, so you see, now you see it in the setting, right? Here is it's Hellenization, and so everybody, they're trying to, all these ideas coming from everywhere, and they're going to try to now all agree. And these people, they were up debating every day, trying to get on one accord. Right? Chapter 15, and that be the last one I'll read, unless I read another one. You got it? But some men came down from Judea and were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the customs of Moses, you cannot be saved. And after Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and debate with them, Paul and Barnabas, the sons and the others, were appointed to go to Jerusalem to the apostles and the elders about this question. So being sent on their way by the church, they passed through Phoenicia and Samaria, describing in detail conversions of the Gentiles, and brought. So you see, this is different from what the Jews were doing now. Now we're talking about they're bringing in the element of Christianity, and now the saints, these Jews who are being accepted, they're having problems now because they're trying to figure out, okay, we fought for 400 years. Sound like slavery. I don't mean to say it like that. We fought for 400 years so that we can be free, and now they're telling us about another freedom. Right? And so there's a question now, I like y'all little Christian thing y'all got going, but you still got to be circumcised. You get it? So Hellenization played a major part in Jewish lives. I mean, even today, the celebration of Hanukkah is not something that we talk about going back to the Maccabean revolt. It's not something that the rabbinical priests have a ceremony for. In fact, it's the miracle of oil that they do that the Jews still do. Where they fry donuts. Anybody know anything about Hanukkah? But me. Okay. Anyway. But do you know what kept Hanukkah from being the most popular? Say, I don't know. I mean, I'm not waiting on you to answer me. I'm just saying, tell me I don't know. Thank you, sir. Christmas. The reason they don't celebrate Hanukkah is because of Christmas. Christmas then took over. We didn't got rabbits and, no, not rabbits, these things. We didn't got that fat man and you can't get nowhere else with him, right? Christmas is taking over that. So in terms of influence and even for some Jews, by the way, right? So this whole idea has had Hellenization has and still has major impact. If you come into a Christian church, you won't hear much about Hellenization. If you go into a Jewish synagogue, you hear a lot about it. You hear a lot about it because Matthias is still a hero, right? When his son Judas took over, he completed. When you read Maccabees, you'll see all of these wars. That's what it is. It's a book of wars, in fact. All right, that's enough time. It's 7:31. Did I do okay? With my time, I mean. The time. All right. So if you're a little fuzzy about Hellenization, you got Bibles and books. But next week I'm gonna teach you about the Nicene Council. All right. So we're gonna go 300 years up, and we're gonna talk about Nicaea. All right. Whew. That's good enough for me. Come on and stand. Hey, listen, thank y'all for those of you who told your flesh you ain't going to eat nothing until it's time. Amen. And I hope that you can, tomorrow you can eat and pray. We'll watch and pray, but you can eat and pray tomorrow. And we're going to come back in here. And thank you for the sacrifice you're making to come into prayer. And I'm telling you, I'm saying sacrifice because prayer ought to be a sacrifice. If you want something amazing, you got to do something extra. That's what we're depending on, and I'm pushing y'all so hard because I need so much. I just want somebody to be in here with me. Okay, I mean, now you can figure out what you want on your own. Now here, last thing. Thank you, Pastor Timmons. But I want all of you by Sunday, you can any day you want, by Sunday, I want you to write down your needs. And I want you to put them in an envelope, fold them, put them in an envelope, and we just going to throw them on the altar. We're going to throw them on the altar all month long. And don't put your name on them, because it's going to force people to peep in them. And it's okay if they're going to give you something, but you're just being nosy. Just bring those needs. I've been writing mine. I left out of town, but I started writing mine this morning, and I said, ooh, God ain't gonna do that. You know what I'm saying? Because I left him. I made it big. I didn't ask him to do something I could do. Deacons up front, and those of you who are sharing tonight your gifts, and thank you for those of you who have recommitted yourself to giving. What we do is going to require giving. I don't care I'm not hearing the world. I don't have a Bentley. I wish I did. I'd sell it and sell it and buy me another car, because I'm not taking no Bentley to the mall. Somebody hit it and then I'm not saved, you know. Oh, no. You know, I've had cars I couldn't drive to the mall. I won't do that again. I want every vehicle I get, I gotta know that I could see somebody leaning up against it. Amen. I'm just being real. That, you know what I'm saying. All right. So, in other words, when you plant with expectation. Yeah. You know, and let it be kingdom expectation. That I believe people are going to be saved because of my giving. I believe that lives are going to be turned around because, you know, I planted. That's what we want, and we want to see everybody engaged in this. And I know, and I'm not talking to people. Let me just close, and then I'll say the rest of that. Di, you off anyway, aren't you? Okay, she's off anyway. Thank you. I'm not talking.